And welcome back to the Hot Lap, where Ferrari fastest in testing on day 2 in the history books. They're going to be the champions, surely. Well, not so fast. Red Bull were champions yesterday, Ferrari champions today. Who's going to be champions tomorrow? We will see. But let's get into testing of day 2, where, as you can see here from Formula1.com, Sainz setting a fairly good pace, let's to be honest, as he improves on Leclerc's earlier benchmark from this morning. So, Carlos Sainz set the pace on that second day of pre-season testing. He ended up doing a 1 minute 29.921 to go top. But that was not the only story here in Formula One land. Up or down in Bahrain, depending where you are. We'll be talking about Red Bull getting a bit too hot. Ferrari and those drain covers. Yep, it's not Las Vegas, but it's struck again. Those red cars love the drain covers. It's like a magnet, I guess. Russell saying Merc is a lot better, and good news for Williams after what was kind of a lackluster day yesterday. Albon, Williams improved, thumbs up. But let's get into the fact that Sainz fastest. Yeah, as we mentioned, a 1 minute 29.91. But to be fair, these were on the C4 Pirelli tyres, which are the second softest in the range. As some teams, it says here, were shifting their attention late in the afternoon / early evening. Depends on what you would call the evening, but it was getting darker, and teams were focusing on performance runs. Some of them were as well. But it was a productive afternoon for the fastest guy, clocking those 84 laps. Leclerc only 54 because of a drain cover, which you probably know, but we'll get into that in a bit. So there we go. Let's have a look at the times here, though. They should be shown on motorsport.com if we scroll all the way down. Yes, so Carlos Sainz fastest, second, albeit on the C3 tyres, but looking very good still, was the Red Bull of Sergio Perez, just shy of 7.5 tenths off the pace of the Ferrari, but on the slower tyres. Once again, Lewis Hamilton third. 1.1 seconds off on the C3 tyres. So him and Sergio Perez, yes, we don't know what engine modes they were running. We do not know what fuel they were running, etc. But they're only a few tenths apart, 3-4 tenths apart, which is not too bad. Bearing in mind, yesterday looked really, really ominous with that Max Verstappen lap. And Lando Norris, 1.3 seconds behind. Ricciardo, only 1.4 seconds behind in the RB. Charles Leclerc on the C3 are 1.8. But interestingly, Ricciardo fifth on the C4 tyres. As you can see here, they are the same tyres that Carlos Sainz was wearing. Had on his car. Lance Stroll 7th, Esteban 8th, Valtteri Bottas 9th, and Oscar Piastri finishes up the top 10 with Logan Sargent 11th, Alonso 12th, the Zhou Guanyu 13th, Pierre Gasly 14th, 15th and 16th, the two houses of Magnussen and Hulkenberg, and then Tsunoda 17th. The rest didn't run. For example, Perez was running for Red Bull, and also I believe it was mainly Logan Sargent today and George Russell, obviously, for Mercedes. But everyone, I think, most people are going to be running tomorrow. They'll be splitting, obviously, their shifts between the morning and the afternoon. So let's talk about that loose drain cover, though, shall we? Very, 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 very strange. So loose drain covers. Here we go. Yeah, it wrecked. Basically, we were watching it and it took away an hour from everyone, didn't it? A loose drain cover, this is on planetf1.com, basically brought a premature end. It was running very wide on the turn 11 curbs that the Ferrari dislodged that piece of metal, which then Lewis Hamilton ran over and hit. Ferrari have informed planetf1.com. It says that the Leclerc's car needs to be fitted with a new floor. But Hamilton only escaped with potential tyre damage, so lucky Hamilton. But Ferrari, the new floor again. I mean, that's, to be fair, bear in mind, Bahrain sees a lot more running than, for example, Las Vegas does. That's inexcusable, really, isn't it? And, it does affect that budget cap, doesn't it? That's more floors. So after Wednesday's Max Verstappen dominance, the chasing pack, it says, went into the second day of testing. Leclerc clocked an early lap of 1 minute 31.7, and that put him just over half a second ahead of Oscar Piastri. And then shortly, that was pretty much that morning session. So, but speaking of the Red Bull, they were running a bit too hot, as I said. So, where is the story? Give me 2 seconds. I'm gonna get that story up in a second. So here we go on planetf1.com. as it is trying to load. Essentially, the Red Bull car, Sergio Perez RB20, was running a bit too hot in Bahrain. That's essentially his brakes. So as we know, Max Verstappen did an absolutely fantastic 140 laps yesterday, but Perez found himself kind of sidelined, despite obviously Red Bull dominating, doing lap after lap on the first day of testing. Perez's luck, isn't it? I mean, geez. So Perez told PlanetF1.com that the front brakes got a bit too hot, and we're just making some corrections now before we head back out. Brake issues and the potential for a small fire are not unusual concerns in Formula 1, it says, as the pit lane Ted Kravitz reported. He says, it's one thing being a second ahead of everybody else, but the car has to be reliable, and it's not, he said. For the moment, the car of Checo Perez, the RB20, is in bits with a brake problem in the garage. As I understand, when the car came in, there was a little brake fire, so we had a small overheating brake problem at Red Bull. I believe that was something similar that McLaren were struggling with at the beginning of their test in 2023, I'm sure. He said it's the kind of thing that can happen. I've seen it happen before, where the brake material is new, as it will be today. So fair enough. I mean, there's a very good reason. So you Red Bull fans might be able to rest easy, potentially. But yeah, so not too bad there. Not the end of the world. But it's, I guess, in a way, it's nice for the fastest team to have a bit of a problem, isn't it? In a way, they're not infallible. It's almost like that, what's it, Rocky 4, when Rocky hits Ivan Drago and he bleeds for the first time. Yes, he's human. Yes, they are human. So we've spoken, obviously, about the drain covers. But Russell quite happy about his Mercedes. So, as you can see, Mercedes have fixed the flaws which plague last year's car. This is from racefans.net. George Russell, it says here, believes Mercedes have finally solved the problem which plagued their cars during the technical regulations that were introduced 2 years ago in 2022. If any of you remember, that Mercedes was bouncing more than anything. It was like a basketball down the straights, and they didn't really get it 100% right, I think, for 2023, keeping that zero-pod concept, although the zero-pod concept alone was maybe not the thing that made them bounce, but anyway, I digress. But they covered 121 laps yesterday, and Russell said he felt much more confident in the car than he was in its predecessor. He said the car last year was really challenging to drive. He said Lewis and I had no confidence in it. It felt like it was going to bite us in every single corner. And if any of you remember the test last year for Mercedes, it did look like it. I mean, it looked okay, but it almost looked like on the edge of adhesion, and it was going to snap at any point. And Russell importantly said, now we can attack the medium and high speed corners without the rear end snapping out. We feel like we've made a really good step in terms of the consistency of the car. He said we can really lean on it better than we've been able to in the past, and this was a huge focus throughout last year. He went on to saying, we saw many flaws with the W14, which the team have done a really great job to rectify. And I think that's really, really important. Both those drivers having confidence, especially with that rear end, because Lewis Hamilton was really, really unhappy with the Mercedes bottom, the Mercedes rear end last year, meaning that he just didn't have the confidence to push in the corners. And with a driver with no confidence, you could potentially lose buckets of time. Now that they have the confidence, they've got something to build on. So maybe Mercedes can actually get a win this year after their winless year in 2023. Fingers crossed, but they're going to have to beat that very ominous Red Bull, unfortunately. So next up, we've got Alex Albon. The new Williams, he says, has fixed the problems, but it's also, on a negative part, like a double-edged sword, it's exposed some fresh issues. This is from motorsport.com. And it said last year, we know Albon guided Williams to 8 points finishes as the team climbed from last to 7th in the Constructors. Amazing job, didn't he? He was one of the people of the year, one of the drivers of the year. But speaking on the second day of pre-season testing in Bahrain, Albon reckoned Williams had worked to rectify many of the significant shortcomings last year. He was 17th faster and he completed 40 laps on the opening morning before stopping on track with a fuel pump fault. And Albon acknowledged that the 2024 car had, though, introduced some problems of its own. He said, we haven't done so many laps, but generally the feeling is good. He went on to saying, we had a big task last year, trying to focus on this year's car, trying to get rid of some of the issues that we've been having consistently throughout this year. And he said we seem to have a couple of corners at this track actually that really highlight the problems. It's nice to know that we have fixed a lot of the problem areas from last year, but there are some new things that we have to iron out. So part of the learning curve, but it's going well so far. I'm just gonna quickly check X to see. Will Buxton normally puts on a what he thinks is the running order in terms of who is fastest. Let's see if he's actually done that recently. I think he did that yesterday, didn't he? Let me see. This was 2 hours ago. He said a good day for most teams overall, but a few issues. Stab out a very early competitive order, usual caveats, and he said Red Bull fastest, obviously. He goes Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston, RB, Alpine, Sauber, Williams, Haas. So there we go. He puts the top three is then Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and the Mercedes in fourth, which is interesting. I mean, yeah, you can. I think you can make an argument for anything at the moment. I mean, Red Bull fastest, but that the people behind, massive question marks. I still think as well that because I think the Mercedes looked in the hands, with Lewis Hamilton doing those performance runs, it looked really, really solid, and it looked planted. Yes, there, even on the bumps, unlike last year, it looked like he had a lot more confidence in it. But then you can't argue that Ferrari was rapid as well, albeit on a slightly faster tyre. Anyway, that's pretty much day 2 in the history books. If you made it to the end, you are amazing. Like and subscribe, comment. I try to answer all your comments. Thank you so much for hitting those likes, hitting those subscribe buttons. We get to all your comments. If you do any of them, you're a champion. If you do 2 of them or more, you're a multiple world champion in our eyes. This has been the Hot Lap. Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.